All right, wanted to share a quick story with you, something that happened to me the other day. It's going to take a very roundabout way of getting there. There's a bit of a twist to this story, but it is a story, so I'm going to tell it like a story because I'm a storyteller. So, Dallas has been hit in the last 6 months with bike sharing craze. Now, if you're not familiar with bike sharing, I don't know how widespread this is. I imagine many cities have seen this, but maybe you don't know about it. But what it is basically is a company comes in and they have hundreds of bicycles that have these electronic locks on them. And basically, you download the app for that company and set up your payment information and all that stuff. And then you go up and you scan a code off the bike, or you just put your bike within proximity of the little sensor or whatever. And it unlocks the bike and it lets you ride the bike for $1 a ride or $1 an hour. I think they have different payment schemes. But anyway, it kind of started with one company here in Dallas, and then suddenly there's like six different companies. They're just dumping bikes everywhere, and they've got different colors. There's a yellow bike, there's a green bike, there's an orange bike, there's a silver bike. I mean, they're everywhere, and it's so funny how it went from everybody was like, wow, this is really cool, to this is a pestilence on humanity. I mean, because they are like on every single street corner. There's just, and people don't, set them up and line them up nicely. They just drop them wherever. I mean, that's kind of the point of the bike, is you ride it, and when you're done, you just leave it there, and then somebody else can come along and ride it. So, I mean, that's the neat thing about it. But then people just kind of like, yeah, I'm done. And they just throw it on the side of the road. There's just bikes everywhere. So, I never actually used it, though. And yesterday, I was out taking a jog because it was a nice day. It's starting to warm up. And I live near a lake called White Rock Lake here in town. And it's a lovely place to run. There's great running trails and biking trails and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm out there and I'm doing my run. And on the way back, I kind of do a little loop, turn around, head back to where I started. I thought, yeah, let's see if I can get one of these bikes. Why not? Give it a try. Never done it before. Been curious. And so anyway, I'm walking back and I find a bike and I'm like, okay, I choose you. There were 50 of them just laying about, but I just went ahead and walked up to one of them. And again, there's all these different companies and I didn't know which was better or worse, or whether it mattered. I don't know. I just picked one. And I'm standing there and I'm like, okay, so I need to download the app. So I'm downloading the app. And so then I get on the app and I'm setting it all up. And I was kind of nervous about the fact that I didn't have my credit card on me. I left that in my car, so I didn't know if I'd be able to make it work. There's always that little, like, just trying to figure out this thing you've never done before. I'm like right next to this very busy road, so there's a lot of traffic noise, and I've got headphones in. I'm listening to a podcast, so I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out this bike, and I'm looking at it, and a guy on a bike stopped on the little bike trail right there. I could see him stop, and he said something. I couldn't make out what he said, but I looked up at him. And he's looking at me. And my first thought was, oh, he's trying to help me set up the bike. Because I clearly looked like I didn't know what I was doing. And that's what I was kind of consumed in at that particular moment. This guy's trying to help me with his bike. And so I couldn't hear what he was saying, so I pulled my earphone out. And I kind of leaned forward. I was like, sorry, what? And he said something again. Again, I couldn't hear him because traffic noise and everything. Keep in mind, I'd just been running, so I'm a little foggy in the head. Got that runner's fog thing going on. So I walk in a little bit closer, and he sticks out his hand to shake. So now I'm like, oh, he's not trying to help me. He's thanking me. That's the first thing that I thought was, here's this guy's like thanking me for using this bike. He can see that I'm setting this up, and he can probably tell that I've never done it before, and he's thanking me for using a bike and enjoying the culture of bikedom and not driving, and I don't know. I'm like, this guy's thanking me for doing this. And for a single split second, my brain thought, maybe this is the CEO of the company, and he's thanking me for using his company. For just a split second. So I walk up a little bit closer, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what'd you say? And then he goes, you're on YouTube, right? Is your name Joe? And I was like, oh, yeah. And so we had this really short conversation. I was curious how he knew who I was, because I had sunglasses on. And I was like, and he was like, oh, I just, the shape of your face. And he said he's an artist, so he knows faces really well, or something like that. And anyway, it was a very short little conversation. He was just, saying really nice, thank you for your channel. I really enjoy it. I love the topics that you talk about. I'm a big fan, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, wow, thank you. That's so cool. And I told him, I said, this is the first time that's ever happened to me. And that was the truth. That was the first time anybody had ever just stopped me on the street to tell me that they recognized me from YouTube. Never happened before. This was a first. So I told him that, and he was like, oh, well, look at that, you're famous. And I'm like, yeah, I should go tell my wife. And it was just a little quick back and forth. This whole story I'm telling you, by the way, took place in like less than a minute, but I'm giving you all the details. So I thanked him. He went on his way. And then I was like, well, that's cool. And I was able to figure out the thing. I got on the bike, rode away. And as I'm riding back to my car, it hit me what a big deal that was. Because that had never happened to me before, not as a YouTuber. Now, I have been to YouTuber meetups and that kind of thing where I was already in like a Facebook group where I had already interacted with some people, so they knew me from there. That's happened before. It happened at a film festival one time with Oceanfront when I screened the movie one night, and then the next day I walked into town. This was in Tiburon, California, which is across the bay from San Francisco. You can actually see the San Francisco skyline from across the bay from there. Beautiful little town. And this whole thing took place in a little downtown area that's nice and little quaint, beautiful little spot. Anyway, I walked into town. I was looking for breakfast, and I'm walking around, and somebody came up, and they're like, are you Joe Scott? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, I saw your movie last night. I'm like, oh, okay. But again, it was still in the confines of that film festival. It wasn't somebody I had never met before who saw me through a thing that I did, just out there. So I'm riding away, and I started really beating myself up because I had imagined that moment many times. Imagining, when is this ever going to happen? Because I've been to VidCon 3 years in a row now, and each year I'm like, maybe somebody will recognize me. And every year I've got more and more subscribers, and every year I'm like, maybe someone will recognize me. And it's never happened. But even then, it would be like in the confines of this whole conference. But I'm riding away, and I realized, oh my God, I didn't even ask this guy's name. But what I'd always imagined, I was like, when somebody, the first person that comes up and recognizes me, I'm going to get a picture with them. I want the picture of this guy, maybe to share on social media, but mostly just for me, to kind of commemorate that moment, because that's a big thing. And I was so wrapped up in just the fact that it was happening, and I was so awkward about it, because I'm an awkward guy generally, that I forgot to do that, and I didn't even get his name, and I feel really bad now. So I don't know who this gentleman was, and I don't know if he watches this channel or where he might follow me in other places. Maybe he just watches my videos. But if you're watching, I really appreciated you saying that, and it was a really big deal for me, and I apologize for being so weird and awkward. And I really should have gotten his name. I do feel bad about that. But yeah, that was weird. And then I started immediately after I had this wonderful moment that wasn't just about the YouTube journey I've been on. Really, in a big way, it's something I've been, I don't know if this makes me sound very good. It's something I've kind of been working toward my whole life. I've always been a screenwriter. I've always been acting in some way. I've always been trying to get films made and be that whole thing. And yeah, I mean, my ego was speaking for a second. I want that. I want that kind of recognition. I've always wanted somebody to just come up and be like, "Well, I'm a big fan of yours," right? Of course, I've always wanted that. And then it happened, and I was so weird about it. And then, of course, immediately the anxiety kicks in, and I start thinking, "Oh God, I'm being watched all the time." It happened once, and I immediately go to, "I'm always being watched." It just suddenly did kind of click in my head, though, like, maybe he was the first person to say anything. There's a good chance that somebody out there saw me and just didn't say anything and was like, I think that's that guy from YouTube. And it reminds me a little bit of growing up in my hometown. I grew up in this very, very small town. Both my parents were teachers. Everybody knew them. I was always within eyeshot of somebody that could tell my parents what I was doing. I couldn't get away with anything. I was always being watched. So I grew up that way. And it just kind of reminded me of that. I've had this sort of anonymity living in a big city now where most people, the vast majority of people, don't know who I am. but now I kind of have this feeling in the back of my head, like I will never know when I'm out doing something whether or not there's somebody that's watching me that knows who I am, and it follows me somewhere. And it's a trip, man. It's a real trip. I've talked before about how I can see how people like Tom Cruise and your Michael Jacksons and your super famous people like that, I can see how they go a little nuts. Because you literally can't just go to the grocery store without everybody in the world knowing who you are. And probably coming up to you and wanting autographs and swarming you and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's got to mess with your head after a while. Not just the lack of anonymity and the lack of privacy and the lack of just being able to get out and do things, but also, your brain starts to internalize that stuff after a while. You start to get a big head. I don't know if that'll happen to me because I'm just so... I don't believe my own hype. If anything, I'm way too modest and I put myself down too much. Way too self-deprecating, probably. But I don't know. It's a weird situation. It's just another example of how this whole journey that I'm on right now is getting weirder and weirder. In a good way. I'm not complaining. It's a very good thing. But it's just a reminder that what I do, people actually see it. It's not, I see these big numbers in my analytics and stuff, and sometimes it's easy to forget that each one of those numbers is a human being that watched the video or subscribed to you and in some way or fashion gives a damn what you think and do. It's a trip. Anyway, but that was a big deal. And again, to the gentleman who stopped, if you happen to be watching this, I really do appreciate you stopping me. And if you are watching this and you happen to see me out in public, feel free to come up and say hi, and we'll have a little chat. Maybe I won't be as awkward next time. Maybe I'll start to get used to it. I don't know. But anyway, interesting story, weird scenario. Thought I would share it. Hope you guys are having a good one. I will catch you next time. Later.